16,000 feet above. The SBDs greet the angry Japanese fire, but keep on coming.
Thank goodness there was enough of us scattered around that it wasn't all concentrated on one guy. They were shooting at all of us. I realized immediately when I started to roll over and go down that I had a problem.
As McGraw charges a transport on the right flank, he realizes that something isn't right.
I had no dive brakes.
For a dive bomber, losing your dive brakes, also known as dive flaps, is a critical situation.
You're supposed to be diving in that dive angle at about 250 knots with your dive flaps out. Now, you take dive flaps out of the equation, it means you're going to be significantly at a higher airspeed on your diving run. Now, that's going to translate to either you having to pickle earlier, so you can still bottom out at your safe pullout altitude, or if you want to ensure a kill, it means you're going to be a lot faster at the bottom of that dive than you wanted to be. And that's going to translate to being a lot closer to the ground and or pulling a lot more G's to not impact the ground.
Right now, as his plane plummets toward the sea faster than a fireball, McGraw is experiencing negative G's. At any moment, the blood supply to his head could swell, causing blindness. Coming down at a 70-degree angle at high speed also means that McGraw's bomb could nail his own propellers.
That'd be the end of your flight.
McGraw has only seconds to decide whether to continue his dive or pull out. 15,000 feet above the ocean on a vertical dive is no time to hesitate. The Texan decides to keep going and take the enemy ship head on.
And I thought, well, I'm going to find out how tough this airplane is. So with a crippled airplane, no dive brakes, I nosed her straight down. I dove close to 3 miles, almost straight down, at terminal velocity. I'd never flown an airplane this fast before. The sound of the wind going across the canopy of that airplane was such a roar and a screech that I'd never heard that before.
Even if he makes his bomb drop, he might not be able to level out and escape sudden impact with the ocean below. McGraw closes on his target at 240 knots. In seconds, he'll have one clear shot.
You've done it so many times, it's like throwing a baseball. You learn it by nature. It was dead on, and I released my bomb.
At 3,500 feet, McGraw delivers 1,000 pounds of Enterprise ordnance on the deck of the transport. Instantly, he pulls up as hard as he can to level out before crashing into his target. In the last possible moment, he clears the air over the transport, just as the bomb drives into the enemy ship and detonates in a massive, tearing explosion. Amazingly, it's a direct hit amidships. It blows the side out of her hull and kills any Japanese soldiers and sailors caught in the blast radius. The transport comes to a sudden halt and begins to list, dead in the water. McGraw manages to level out of his dive and make his escape.
When you're working with less than a fully functional combat system, it makes you just a little bit more attuned to what you do have. He pushed it in a little closer than he would have to try to compensate for that deficiency. It's significant that you can overcome a thing like no dive flaps.
And McGraw's not finished. As he passes an enemy destroyer at low level, his gunner unleashes a burst of .30 caliber lead. His mission accomplished, McGraw heads for Guadalcanal's Henderson Field. A mile to the north, Flatley's fighters rip the enemy troop ships with their big 50s. At 300 miles an hour, the Grim Reapers punish the decks of the transports with unstoppable firepower. Finally, Flatley and the rest of his air group make way for Guadalcanal. 2 transports are terminated, but somehow, 5 of the stubborn ships keep going. A half hour later, a second flight of Enterprise bombers from Henderson Field make a run on the transport force. It's a bloodbath. Dive bombers manage to disable several transports, but at a heavy cost. Flak from the Japanese destroyers and 7.7mm bullets from enemy Zeros take their toll.
Commanding officer took one group in there and he didn't have any fighter protection, and a fresh squadron of Zeros came in and hit them when they got there.
Among the Enterprise flyers lost in the terrible skies over the transport force is McGraw's friend and Santa Cruz wingman, Warren Welch. Together, the two airmen discovered the first of the enemy ships at Santa Cruz in October. Now, Welch is the victim of enemy fire in the fight against the transports.
My good buddy, Warren Welch, after he had dropped his bomb and got a transport, the Jap shot him down and killed him there. And that was 3 weeks after our first battle together.
In all, 7 American pilots from the Big E are killed in the desperate attacks of November 14th. But the Enterprise pilots have succeeded in slowing down the enemy ships and destroying hundreds of Imperial troops.
Convoy itself, by the end of that afternoon, of the original 11 transports, only 4 of them are operable. 1 has retreated to Shortland with a number of survivors. The other 5 have either been sunk or abandoned and will shortly sink.
As the second day of killing ends, Enterprise bomber, torpedo, and fighter pilots land on Henderson Field. It's still in American hands, but under heavy enemy bombardment. Arrival at Henderson Field is almost as deadly as fighting in the skies.
Just about the time we jump down on the ground, another shell comes overhead. You don't have to be told what it is. You hear it. You know what it is. We both hit the deck.
Well, I'm sure for them, it gave them a whole new outlook on the war. Because it looks a hell of a lot different from the sky than it does once you put your foot on the deck. It's a totally different world.
Even worse than the dangers of incoming fire, McGraw must suffer the jeers of the Marines, who laugh at any Navy pilot ducking for cover. For most of them, this is just another day on the canal. After dodging a number of shells that slam into the dirt around him, McGraw has a chance run-in with the man in charge, Marine General Alexander Vandegrift. Cool under fire, the legendary Leatherneck watches the bombardment from an observation post.
I walked over and I said, "General, may I join you?" And he says, "Be my guest." So I went up the ladder. But this time, I figured I'm not going to let any damn Marine laugh at me ever again about dodging from a shell.
Together, McGraw and the renowned Marine commander watch as enemy artillery and mortar shells lob onto the airfield from the jungle.
Says, "I am down to 50%. They got so many men out with the problem with the mosquitoes and other illnesses. So many of them that are shot up, hurt, in the hospital, they're not able to fight, and we're hanging by our tooth and toenail, and we can barely hold on against what's out there." It made me feel better because I had hit my transport dead center, and I knew they weren't coming ashore.
But the grim satisfaction of battle doesn't last long. Soon, McGraw and the other Enterprise pilots will get a little taste of night on Guadalcanal.
Time came when it getting too dark. One of the Marines took me in tow and he says, I'll show you where you're going to live. And there were tents staggered along each side of this path down into the jungle. We walked past the first tent and went to the second one, which was on the right. He says, "This is your tent."